Swallowtail by Sherry Michelle. She was still a mother, a wife, a daughter, and a friend. She'd move heaven and earth to keep it that way. Swallowtail is a haunting story about life, love, loss, and just how far we'll go to control it all. Chapter 1. Patty, the teller supervisor, stopped dead in her tracks. Her mouth hung agape as steaming coffee ran from her mug onto the cool pavement, splashing her worn loafers. Unease pooled in the pit of Claire's stomach. As she approached her, she ran her hands over her pants in a quick self-check. Fabric softener? Panty liner? No. Nothing horrifying was stuck to her, as far as she could tell. She was wearing a new cream-colored suit, winter whites. Hardly anything to spill your coffee over, she thought, as she hurried past Patty and the tattered plastic smoking tent outside the bank's employee entrance. Claire relaxed when she saw the back of George's bald head in the security booth. Patty's a little off this morning. She flashed her bank ID and reached for the heavy electronic door. George spun away from the security monitors. I don't know. His ears seemed especially pink as he rushed up to the window. Claire couldn't help wondering what he'd been watching and tried to get a peek over his shoulder. George stepped to the side, blocking her view. He gave her an overly toothy smile and buzzed her in as he reached for the phone. Claire frowned and continued down the hall. She heard Marilyn from Human Resources snap at George through his speakerphone. "What is it now?" She thought she heard George whisper, "She's here!" just as the heavy door latch shut behind her. Me? I'm always here. Like they'd notice if I wasn't. The Human Resources receptionist walked out of her office, engrossed in her paperwork. "Morning, Sue," Claire called out, noting Sue's usual sleek straight hair, flawless makeup. "Claire?" Sue breathed as she did a double take. A file slipped from her hand, sending half a dozen sheets of paper floating to the floor. "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," Claire apologized as she crouched down to help her pick up the papers. "Thanks, Sue cut herself off. Her face flushed as she grabbed the papers from Claire's hand. "How are the fertility treatments going, Sue?" Sue blew at her bangs to keep them from sticking to her forehead. "I can't talk. I mean, I've got a million emails." She stood up and backed into the office door, clutching a folder to her chest. "Don't remind me. I'll catch up with you later. Who's running the meeting this morning?" "I don't know. Actually, I think it's canceled." "Canceled? They never cancel. Even when we had the fire drill, they let us sear a bit while they went over goals. What's going on?" "Yeah, right," Sue half answered. Blinking as she fumbled for the knob, she backed through the office door and quickly shut it. Claire shook her head, adjusted her purse on her shoulder, and continued down the hall. She couldn't help pausing at the doorway to the boardroom. It was empty, but all the lights were on, and the blinds were closed. No pastries, just coffee cups strewn about. One with blood-red lipstick tattooed on the rim. The leather chairs were in complete disarray. Claire's stomach knotted. She detected the faint scent of Burberry cologne. Orrin, their CEO. The blood-red lipstick was Marilyn's, head of HR. Venturing inside, Claire spotted several pads of paper bearing Union Allied's logo. She stepped back over to the door, glanced up and down the hallway, and slipped back to the table for a closer look. She picked up one of the blank pads and tried to decipher the impressions left behind. There was a list of names. Her heart seized when she spotted her own. She hadn't noticed it before, but now the unmistakable odor of WD-40 permeated the air. Voices trailed in from down the hall. Claire tossed the pad back onto the table. She peeked out the door and saw two tellers paging through a magazine near the associates' entrance. Hurrying out of the boardroom, she glanced back one more time to make sure they hadn't seen her. Her phone vibrated inside her purse as she approached her cubicle. She bit her lip and crumpled into her chair when she saw Julia's office directly across the hall was empty. In the 7 years they'd worked together, Julia had never been late. She fingered the little silver filigree tube of ashes she wore on a long chain before she pulled her phone from her purse. A text from Colin. "Suits everywhere. Stay put." "Why?" she texted as she removed her coat and draped it over the file cabinet. "Don't know yet. Can't get to Dad." Orrin Redfield, Colin's father, had reluctantly placed his younger son in charge of investments shortly after his eldest son's death 9 years prior. Claire decided to give Julia a heads up. Colin never would. The call went straight to voicemail. She whispered, "Hey, Jules. Something major's going down here. Not a good day to be late. Where are you?" A commotion in the hallway. Two heavy-set older men in dark suits, a tall one with a thin white horseshoe of hair above his ears, grumbled obscenities as they rushed into Julia's cubicle and began digging through drawers. "I told her not to make fudge in there. Gotta be some kind of fire code violation. I never should have brought that hot plate in. Shit, I think my initials are on it." Claire didn't recognize the men, which instantly made things seem worse. They didn't really look like fire marshals, but what does a fire marshal look like? Luckily, as usual, her presence went unnoticed. Seated in her chair, she rolled herself over to the wall of her cubicle. The fabric-covered partition felt itchy against her cheek as she listened to the men. She couldn't make out what they were saying. Her fingers cramped. She glanced down to see she still had her phone clenched tightly in her hand. She relaxed her grip and was slipping the phone into her pocket when she heard a crash. She held her breath and peered around the edge of the partition. They were tearing Julia's office apart. Files and papers lay everywhere. One man left the cubicle with Julia's computer. Another stood on her desk removing tiles from the ceiling. Claire jerked her head back so fast her chair nearly slipped out from under her. She peeked around the edge of the partition again and saw another man, an older man in a gray suit and thick glasses, racing down the corridor toward them. Claire ducked back and tried to quiet her breathing. Oh my God, my password. She's been using it for months. No, be rational, it's just a password. Yet she couldn't forget Patty, Susan, and George's strange behavior. She also couldn't bear to take another look. But she couldn't resist either and found herself inching toward the edge of the partition. Two younger men were talking to the man with the thick glasses. They were scribbling everything they said in little notepads. Claire rolled her chair back into the corner, realizing how ridiculous and guilty she'd look if someone walked in. It felt like it was 100 degrees in her cubicle. Her brown silk blouse clung to her skin. She peeled off her jacket and hung it over the back of her chair. Fanning herself with her hand didn't help. She only managed to knock her favorite photo of Paul and the girls off her desk. She froze and hoped the noise hadn't attracted any attention. God, I wish I could reach Paul. But he's already in surgery by now, anesthetizing some lucky soul. Now, get a grip. You want to be conscious for this. She set the silver frame back on her desk. Her gaze drifted to her own face next to her husband's. Plain Jane. If you haven't blossomed by 33, it ain't happening. Thank God the girls take after Paul. Anna's already stunning at 14. She just doesn't know it yet. And there's never been a cuter kindergartner than Em. Tears welled up, but with a few deep breaths, she forced them back. Focus. Julia's in trouble. Claire's mind still refused to believe what her eyes had seen. Said something she shouldn't have in an email? IRS? Please don't let it be an accident. Yet she knew deep down none of that made sense considering what was happening just a few feet away. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she pulled her phone out and texted Colin, then Julia, then Colin again. The same message each time. Call me. What should I do? Get out of the damn corner, Claire, and sit at your desk like a normal human being. Someone is probably on their way down to explain the whole situation to you. You spend every Thanksgiving with the CEO and his son. Colin's your best friend, for God's sake. I'm sure Orrin is on his way down here right now. Just calm down. She put on her jacket and rolled herself back along the length of her desk. Then she leaned back to see what the suits were up to. The older men pulled the rest of the files from Julia's cabinets and threw them in boxes, along with her personal belongings. Everyone was talking at once. Claire tucked loose tendrils of what she considered mousy brown hair behind her ears and wished she'd worn a little makeup. Some heavy hitters were on site. Marilyn from HR appeared in the corridor between Claire and Julia's offices and stood there for a moment, staring at Claire. Marilyn was the tallest, thinnest suit of them all. She wore her hair short and dyed blue-black, along with her eyebrows, which resided entirely too high on her forehead, giving her age. She was clutching a file folder to her chest so tightly her fingers had turned white. Julius? Wonder what's in my file, or if anyone's even bothered to ever open the thing. Claire swallowed hard, afraid she might cry if she opened her mouth. Marilyn remained stone-faced. The two women had disagreed on more than one occasion. There had been little policy squabbles about parking, personal emails, and breaks, but there was one big battle everyone knew about. Marilyn had confiscated Michael Vanesco's turkey baster, which she'd known it was his only means of calming himself. Michael was quiet, autistic, late 20s, and well-liked by everyone despite his limited social skills. His attention to detail and affinity for routines made him an excellent employee. Like Claire, Michael had never missed a day of work. He was always in proper uniform with his name tag in place and his dark hair neatly combed. He was meticulous when it came to his janitorial duties, and he was more reliable than the old bank clock. There was just one small quirk that posed a problem, for Marilyn anyway: his turkey baster. Win-Win Staffing Solutions, a non-profit organization that arranged employment for individuals such as Michael, had been perfectly clear with Marilyn about the turkey baster. They had also assured her Michael would be a wonderful asset to the institution, as he had a knack for noticing anything out of the ordinary. They even went so far as to suggest it would be like having a second security system. But the turkey baster was part of the package. There was no getting around it. It was immediately clear to Claire how much Michael depended on those little puffs of air to get through his day. Rattled, he'd hold the long plastic baster by its gold bulb and squeeze it into his hand. Anyone could see it provided him with a soothing sensation whenever he felt frustrated or upset. If someone moved something, a desk, a wastebasket, or even a credit card application holder, Michael was quick to notice. He remained with the item for a few minutes, repeatedly squeezing the baster until he'd made peace with the new arrangement. Marilyn had agreed to the baster stipulation, but had confiscated it in less than a week. "This is cruel," Claire had told her, after watching Michael pace and pull at his hair when he couldn't get his hands on his baster. "He's not hurting anyone, and you knew he needed it when you hired him." "We have an image to uphold, and turkey basters are far from acceptable. He's not stupid. I've seen him fix complex machinery. He doesn't need that ridiculous thing." "His intelligence has nothing to do with this. We're talking about emotional well-being. Does Orrin know you're doing this?" Marilyn had scoffed. "I assure you, Mr. Redfield has more important matters to tend to." "Has it even occurred to you that this is very bad for morale? I know, Orrin, if he finds out you're doing something that so many of his associates consider cruel, you'll have a much bigger problem than a turkey baster." "Fine," Marilyn had huffed. "Let's not make a federal case of this. I'm placing you personally in charge of this, since you're obviously so passionate about it. But get this straight. I don't want to see that thing in the lobby. You find a way for him to be discreet and he can keep it." She'd pulled the baster from her desk drawer and slapped it into Claire's hand. Finally, the baster Nazi spoke. "Michael should be arriving shortly. I want you to keep him in here with you until you're told otherwise." "You know how agitated he gets if we alter our routine," Claire reminded her. "It's not my concern. I want the two of you to remain right here." "What's happening?" Claire rose from her chair, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm not at liberty to discuss this with you. I would appreciate if you would just see to Michael." "All right, but Marilyn, please, can you just tell me, is she all right? Has something happened to Julia?" Claire heard her voice crack as she discreetly slipped her phone into her pants pocket. Marilyn turned her back on Claire and entered Julia's office without another word. Claire blinked in disbelief and leaned against her desk. She slowly turned to see about a dozen associates stared over the tops of their cubicles. When she attempted to make eye contact with the people she knew and spoke to every day, they averted their eyes and sat down. Her thoughts turned to Michael. At least she could count on him to treat her the same way he always had. He needed more protecting than usual today with Marilyn on the warpath. He always arrived right at 8. She still had 15 minutes. Claire figured she could either sit at her desk, pretending to check her email like an idiot, or she could find a good hiding place and try to phone Colin and get some answers. Marilyn and all of the men in Julia's office were deep in conversation when she slipped out of her cubicle. But to her surprise, one man noticed her. There was no denying it. He looked like a detective. Their eyes met and he scribbled something in his pad. Claire hurried down the hall to the ladies' room near the drinking fountain. She paused outside the door when she noticed something odd. One of the security officers had stepped in front of the emergency exit at the end of the hall. He's just waiting for someone. You're being paranoid. She gave him a strained smile, which he ignored. Confused, she slowly pressed her hand against the restroom door. Hushed voices echoed off the tiles. She cracked the door open further to take a quick peek inside. 2 young women dressed in navy blue teller uniforms stood at the sinks. One applied lipstick while the other popped a piece of gum in her mouth. I can't believe she's here. Like nothing ever happened, Longhair said. Are you sure? Pixie Cut asked. Hello, didn't you see your old slug bug in the lot? That's nuts. Someone like her would never do that. She's too goody-goody. No balls. I don't think it's true. Oh, it's true. Patty's wigging out. Love, love, love it, Longhair declared. Really? Yeah, she told Marge we shouldn't even be open today. Duh. Everybody's flipping out all over the place. It's the perfect time to walk off with a bunch more. Think about it. They probably don't even have the cameras on while they're going over all those tapes, Longhair reasoned. I don't know. I think that's all digital. I'm sure they can record and play at the same time, Pixie Cut said. Still, you have to admit, they've never been as distracted as they are today. Panic gripped Claire by the throat. Her hands began to shake. This isn't happening. This isn't my life. She turned to see the security guard eyeing her. She couldn't remember his name. There was that WD-40 smell again. A rivulet of sweat traveled down the side of her nose. She wiped it away and pushed the restroom door open. A deafening silence filled the air, punctuated by the swift click of her heels as she blew past the 2 girls to the last stall. She slipped inside and locked the door behind her. Holy shit, she heard one whisper. Claire pulled her phone out to see if she'd missed any messages. Where are you? She texted Colin. The phone buzzed in her hand and she almost dropped it. It was Colin calling. You okay, Claire? No, she whispered, trying to stifle tears. The tellers were listening. Shh, wait a second, Claire told him. She waited. The girls waited. It was a standoff. Come on, you can't stay in here forever. Then she distinctly heard one pair of heels slowly walk toward her stall. Claire's chest, neck, and shoulders cinched up like someone had pulled a drawstring at the base of her skull. She backed away from the door to the cool marble wall. Bending down, she saw 2 feet clad in navy blue pumps. Go away. Just leave me alone. Claire, are you there? Colin asked. Claire placed her thumb over the phone speaker. She heard the other girl whisper, Come on, I'm going to be late. I've already got 2 write-ups. The pumps turned away from the door. Claire listened to their heels click across the tiles before the door shut behind them. Okay, Claire whispered. I'm alone. What's going on? Julia's disappeared with close to $3 million. What? That's impossible. I knew something had happened to her, but Jesus, Colin, everybody's looking at me like I did it. Breathe, Claire. Everything's going to be fine. You haven't done anything wrong. What if she's implicated us somehow? Claire cried. How? Why would she do that? I don't know. Why would she steal $3 million? Colin, they're tearing her office apart. You'd better wipe those Mr. Leatherpicks off your computer. Don't be ridiculous. I'm not being ridiculous. We had lunch with her every day. She's been using my password for months. Since last spring when she forgot hers and expense reports were due. What if she set us up? What if we go to prison for this? Oh no, I'm not wearing an orange jumpsuit for anyone. Now those chambray shirts they wore in Shawshank, those were... Knock it off. This isn't funny. I have the girls to think of and Paul. I could lose everything. Claire, seriously, calm down. You sound like Tommy Lee Jones is after you. Where are you? A hen house or an outhouse? Outhouse, she whispered as she stared at the toilet and humiliation sunk its teeth into her. She walked over to the toilet paper dispenser and tore off a few squares to wipe her nose. Stay there. Our meeting just broke. I'll come get you, Colin advised her. Don't. They've got security posted everywhere. I'm sure everyone knows exactly where I am. And besides, I've got to get Michael and take him to my office. Marilyn practically ordered me to keep him busy. She's even acting like I had something to do with it. Me. I've never even been late. She's lost her mind. She shook her head and tossed the crumpled tissue into the toilet. No kidding? Colin whispered. I'm telling you, she was absolutely awful to me this morning. No, I mean Michael. He's here? He will be, like clockwork. You know Michael. Claire, he helped her. What? Julia conned Denny from security into leaving the keys with her last night. Then she filled a bunch of printer paper boxes and had Michael carry them out to her car. Supposedly it's all on camera. She did not. She never would have... Claire sputtered in protest as she slid down the wall and squatted on the floor with her head in her hand. Oh my God, what has she done? Who's she thinking? She's never said anything that would make me think she was capable of... Oh, poor Michael. I know, it's crazy. Obviously, Michael had no idea what he was doing. He'll be okay. Everything's so chaotic this morning. They're calling his dad. Sal's coming to take him home. Go find Michael and meet me in my office as soon as you can. But he'll have his bag of change to count, and I'm not supposed to let him do it today. He'll already be upset. I have to count that change 3 times every morning, no exceptions. You know that. Tell him he can feed my fish. He loves that. No, he loves feeding your fish after he's had his change counted 3 times. But I'll try. Claire found Michael fidgeting by the time clock. He held up a Ziploc bag full of change and made a beeline for her. His turkey baster puffing away. Help him. Save him. Think.